Hey, everybody, if you're listening to Bedtime Stories from Sleep With Me, and you listen to it on a regular basis, you listen to Sleep With Me on a regular basis, Bedtime Stories from Sleep With Me and Sleep With Me, either or both make your life better, please consider supporting the show so we can keep putting these episodes out week after week, year after year. It's only possible through listener support. So if it's meaningful for you and you want like 900 ad-free story-only episodes, 1,400 ad-free full episodes, bonus episodes, go to sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus right now. Don't wait till tomorrow. Do it now. Set up the bonus content tomorrow. But sign up right now so we can keep the show going, and you'll have access to all this amazing stuff. You can even try it out for 6 days. There's a 7-day trial, but always, make sure end it on the 6th day to be safe. And then as soon as you stop listening to the show, you could stop supporting it, but it'll make all the difference in the world to the future of the podcast and to your bedtime listening. That's sleepwithmepodcast.com/plus. Thanks. Bedtime Stories from Sleep With Me is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy to see if you could save when you bundle your home and auto policies. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states. Friends beyond the binary, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. Space, these are the voyages of a meandering, enterprising man that found sleep, I didn't find sleep enterprising, and I didn't realize I was embarking on a sleep enterprise. I mean, it was always like enterprise, it was like, there's another enterprise that used to be when you couldn't do everything through the app, and you could do a setting like, please leave me alone, no upgrades, no upgrades, no upgrades. That's like what my bedtime used to be like renting a car in the aughts or even the tens. I don't know. I haven't done it lately, so I don't know what it's like. But the last few times I just did it on the app. So I said, oh, and then I just said it over. Oh, no, it's all in the app. Oh, no, nope, it's all in the app. Nope. I guess it's opportunity for assertiveness. None of that has, I don't even know why I'm on that topic. This is the Starship Enterprise, is something we'll refer to way later in the show. But it's time for Sleep With Me, a podcast that's here to keep you company while you fall asleep, to take your mind off stuff, to be your friend in the deep, dark night, because you deserve a good night's sleep. The show is very different. It does take a few tries to get used to, but I'm so glad you're here. We're going to do some support for the show. Then there'll be a long, meandering intro to ease you into bedtime. And then we'll start talking about an episode of Star Trek TNG. Be more like a bedtime story, though, if you don't watch the show or you're not familiar with it. And I think that's it. What else? I can't remember. I can't remember even how I start my own podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I think that's I just think I go to the next thing, right? I'm all by myself, so I don't know. I'm waiting for somebody. But yeah, it's time for Sleep With Me, the podcast that puts you to sleep. And these sponsors are how we keep the show coming out for free twice a week. Thanks, everybody. Oh, boy, everybody. This is a tale, one of these tales that's never been told. And it's called The Pickle Carver. And it's a tale that actually has never been told till tonight. So you're in for a treat. And you may raise your hand and say, I don't know, can you consider a pickle a treat? And I would say, okay, one, I agree with your skepticism. So let me just say that right up front. I'm not trying to diffuse your skepticism or objection to a pickle being a treat. But I would say, let's just run through a couple of things. One, I guess a question for you to answer would be, do treats have to be sweet? And I guess that would help create your answer. But I would say one other quick observation is that at least in Disneyland and Disney World probably Universal, And other theme parks, you can buy a pickle by itself. Like you can get an individual pickle, or you can be served a pickle as part of your meal. But there's stands, at least in Disneyland, where you could buy a pickle. And I'd say, well, and what else is for sale there? Other treats. And then you could say, well, they also sell fruit salad or whatever. I'd say, okay, well, is that a treat? So then it'd say, okay, at least we're in the wheelhouse of diffuse. If you say it's not a treat, then you'd say probably you couldn't say fruit salad's a treat either. So anyway, just a thingamajig that I don't. Oh, so this is a tale never told. The Pickle Carver has nothing to do with that stuff. But let's see. So once upon a time, there was a person. And their name was Gila. We'll say Gila, Gila. And I think it's a Gila, Gilla. And Gila lived in the big city. And every day Gila would go outside to play. This was like within a few block area of the apartment building where Gila lived. She could go play as she wished. And she would usually go play with other children in the neighborhood, or if not, just walk around. And they had a balcony on their apartment, which was about halfway up a apartment building. And usually her grandmother would sit out there and not keep an eye on her. But it was a different time, right? I don't know. It was a time like where someone would discover pickle carving, maybe. So then what happened was, or other things Gila did. Let's get to that. So this was actually, I don't know if it was the 80s, the 90s, or the 70s, or the aughts, or the 10s. But they had, they even had each, not every neighborhood, but there was city pools in this big city. And I guess this was there was a pretty decent budget for these pools because they were used by residents of the city. And so the pool had changing rooms, snack bar, tables, lifeguards, swimming lessons, everything you'd want in a city pool. Not this particular pool, but even musical interludes. And one thing Gila always wondered was why, when there was a summer storm, did we always have to get out of the pool? And Gila asked one time, and grandmother said, so you don't, because it's raining, don't want you to catch a cold while you're in the pool. And Gila said, we don't always have to get out of the pool when it's raining. I thought it was related to the thunder or the lightning. And the grandmother said, here, drink some water, because you do want to stay wet on the inside. And Gila said, okay. But then the time came where Gila got a little bit older, and Gila was still playing in the neighborhoods and stuff like that. But there came this time where there was these summer storms, and the pool was closed every day. And it was really raining and windy and thunder and lightning kind of stuff. For multiple days, right? And then the power went out, and nothing, these are all things that everybody was prepared for, at least at Gila's building. But most of the neighborhood was prepared for this because this was a common occurrence. But the thing was that because it was raining, Gila spent a lot of time at home, and Gila was the only child. And so it was a bit boring, especially after the sunset. But even during the day, it was usually it was storming. So it's pretty dark in the apartment. Apartment wasn't that big, no power. And usually sometimes during the weekdays, because Gila was off from school, just grandmother was there. So it was a bit dull. And, Gila would read. And actually, all the adults in her life was okay, well, let's schedule out your day if you're going to be so bored during this stormy season. And don't forget to drink ice water. But you could do reading. You could do some indoor exercise or, rompus, play with other kids in the building. There was a couple scheduled activities, but because it was indoors, they said, now go back, please, let's go back to your own apartments now. And, but, usually all that would peter out. So there'd be a lull. And what the Gila's family is trying to do is make sure there was a cure for that lull, that the lull didn't hit like right when they got home from work because, they were tired from, they just didn't want, like they said, okay, let's be proactive about this. So there's not an inflated level of tension when we get home from work or expectations, that we could be present for you, but not, also be present for the fact that we just got home from work and we're trying to decompress too. And so they said, okay, so they had ideas, but they said, why don't you come up with a hobby? And Gila said, well, tell me. And they said, well, coloring books is a past, that could be a hobby. But, drawing, that could be a hobby. And Gila said, really? There's a difference between coloring books and drawing. And they said, Gila, you're getting, they said, some sort of other activity that may be slightly like school, but different than school because you enjoy it. But you're also you're a little bit, it's a little bit challenging. And Gila said, so I'm looking for something that's outside of my comfort zone, that's a hobby, that takes some skill, but is pleasurable and probably process-based, like you always teach me, parents. And they said, great idea. So why don't you, we could go to the library, you could look up, we could go through the different, the parents said, we don't know the Dewey Decimal System off the top of our head, though we should because we were both previously employed by libraries. So it's slightly humbling that we don't know this off the top of our head because we don't know if it's the 900s or the 200s or the 700s. But we could go walk through the art section, look through some art books. Doesn't have to be art. There's a hobby section. So Gila said, shouldn't we just start at the hobby section? And they said, as you wish, Gila. And then they said, grandmother will take you tomorrow. And on the way there to the library, they looked at another one of grandmother's hobbies. I guess you could I don't know if you could call it a hobby. And Gila went through this. Was they did have 99. I don't know what they called 99-cent stores at this particular period in time, and they may not have been known as that, but maybe those were 5 and dime. I don't think it was post 5 and dime. I'm not sure if it was still 99 cents. I've been in a 99-cent store in the 90s at least. So it could have been the 90s. I don't know. I can't say for sure I've been in a 99-cent store in the 80s. But, just in case you're trying to say you're raising strong objections. I don't know why you would, right? But so, where were we? I'm lost. So Gila so the grandmother would like to go through the 99-cent store and not do window shopping, but kind of viewing. And then say, okay, let's pick something out that you want, Gila. And then we'll do something to earn it on the way to the library or the way back, and then you can spend it. And this was one of the positive growth opportunities that grandmother offered. Another one of her things was she'd pay Gila $1.07 because that's how much stuff at the 99-cent store costs with sales tax at this particular time in this particular city, in this particular story. That's the cost. So whatever that is, I don't know. It's around over 7%, or maybe 8%. I don't know what it was. Those are all the taxes that would be applied to your purchase at a 99-cent store, just in case you're wondering where I got that number from. And on this particular trip, Gila tried on a bunch of sunglasses and said, I really have my heart set on sunglasses, and did a lot of that. But also they went through all the other aisles. But Gila was like, I'm going to go, can I go back? And Grandma said, no, let's walk through the store. Then you can look at the sunglasses again. Then we'll go to the library. And we'll look through some books. Now, for some reason, so then they walked through the store again, and then they looked at the sunglasses again. Then they walked to the store. Oh, did I say the growth opportunity? I think I forgot that part. So the grandmother would pay her $1.07. Oh, yeah, I got distracted by the sales tax. for doing a kind act, finding someone who could do something kind to. We get paid $1.07. Well, actually in credit, because she didn't actually she wouldn't give the money to Gila. But at this point, it was good for a pair of sunglasses. So Gila was on the lookout for anything, but she didn't actually they didn't really encounter anybody that had a real, could have used some sort of assistance or kindness or whatever. And Gila even tried to slow down at the doors of the library to wait to see if she could open the door or close the door for anybody, but no. So then she went into the library, and for some reason, grandmother started off with a Tudor, I don't know if that's correct, architecture, and they spent a lot of time looking at those books. Then they went to I don't know if it was electricity, but the next book Gila looked through had to do with television antennas. And I don't know if it was a repair, because they picked up different books. So then those were the first two books she went through. And Gila said, okay, well, two things I'm not interested in. Then there's a third book about recreational vehicles, RVs, not mobile. Well, mobile, I don't know, mobile home is different than an RV, right? And like a picture, not a picture book, but a book with a lot of pictures. And Gila said, "Oh boy, I like this. Look at these people, or look at these locations. And this is amazing. I think I would like this to be my hobby, grandmother. And I'd like to check this book out. It's not a reference book, but I'm going to reference it for my hobby." And grandmother said, "Okay, well, you could talk. That's not the kind of hobby we have. The kind of hobby I was thinking, and maybe your parents were thinking, is something you could get for $1.07. Or, accumulation of those." She said, "Remember we walked through the balloons, the ribbons, the art supplies, the glues, the wooden pieces, the little glass things, cleaning supplies. Maybe start your own business, and then you can get an RV." But she said, "I don't know if an RV is a hobby." And then Gila, she went to the index of the book, and she looked up hobby, and it was hobbyists, recreational vehicle hobbyists, and they had a whole chapter about. So she said, "Okay, well, I see here." So whatever, they checked that. That was one of the books they decided to check out. The next section they went to was, I think, I don't know what exactly the section of the library was. This is all nonfiction, by the way. And I mean, talk about great rainy day activity, but it was a book about hair curlers. And Gila said, "Yeah, that's probably not for me." I don't know if it was a history. I would love to have my hands on that book now as a sleep pot, a history of hair curlers. So that one didn't work. Then there was one about costuming. And this one also sounded very interesting. It was a history of costuming within off-Broadway, something like that. So kind of like a memoir history type book. And Gila did enjoy kind of looking at the different things of plaid, just different, it was interesting. And something about it appealed to her, but not the costuming or the off-Broadway play. Then they looked through a book about radios, but it wasn't, it was about transistor radios. And again, that was kind of similar to the other, TV antennas. Gila said, "I like listening to the radio and music, but not for me." But then they got to something that really did get Gila's attention, which was sand sculptures. And this, again, was a pictorial of sand sculptures and sand sculpture design. And Gila's mind was blown by this. And she was showing grandmother. Grandmother was kind of sleeping most of the time. This was just because she knew this library is a good place to, especially with someone that's fairly responsible like Gila. And she said, Gila, I love this book. Look at this. Look at this thing. They built this thing. It's a crab, but it's made of sand. These aren't just sand castles. They're sand sculptures. And I'd like to do this as a hobby. And Gila said, okay, well, this could be more of a past. This could be something we do because we could go out, to Brighton Beach. We could go to different places. But we do, that would be an outing. It's not something you could do at home, especially you can't do, like she said, there could be a future one, but during the stormy season, we're not going to be doing a lot of sand sculpting. But I think you're onto something. And she said, look at that over there. There's somebody being trained at the reference desk. And Gila watched that too. So observational. I mean, I guess if you're going to spend 8 or 9 hours in the library, I don't know if they were there that long because they did, or maybe they left and went back. They did go to a diner and have lunch. So I guess they left and came back. Not an important part of this story. Where was, so she said, maybe you're onto something. Oh, and then she said, watch, there's someone being trained. So then Gila was watching the training going on and observing, and also imagining, if the training was a sand sculpture, it was to talk about an imagination. But she was watching the kind of face of the trainee who still seemed unsure. And the person training and then seemed nervous. And Gila said to her grandmother, that person seems nervous and they're trying to get their confidence and implement the training they're being trained. And grandmother said, well, what are they being trained on? And Gila said, helping people find books, assisting patrons. And grandmother said, they could use a confidence boost, huh? And Gila said, yes. And I could use my question answered, but I don't have to have it answered. But now I'm thinking this could be, and grandmother said, go ahead. So Gila went up to the person and said, hey, hi, I need some help. And they said, okay, what can I help you with? And Gila said, I found this book, which I'm going to check out, about sand sculptures. But, with the storms and stuff, I can't go sculpting sand. And I'm looking for something similar to sculpting sand, but not the same, that I could do at home during the stormy season. And the two librarians looked at one another, and the trainer said, go ahead. She said, okay, well, we're going to use a little brainstorming technique. This is a trainee to Gila. And I said, okay, well, so you need a book, something like sand sculpting, but that you could do at home. Where do you live? And Gila said, 44. And she said, no, what kind of dwelling? And she said, a smaller apartment. And she said, okay, me too. So I understand that. So no pot. She goes, nothing, nothing with big equipment or specialized. So probably not pottery. Probably not. She goes, do you have any Play-Doh or sculpting clay? And Gila said, I'm not in, I don't know about that. And she said, okay, not sculpting with clay or doughs, something you could do at home. And she said, what I just thought of is, she goes, what about whittling? And Gila said, what's whittling? And she said, well, let me show you a few books on whittling. And Gila said, okay, thank you. And then they went and got a book on whittling, right? And Gila brought that book back, and she started going through these pictures of stuff that had been whittled from wood. And she said, holy cow, look at this stuff, grandmother. Look at this. This is amazing. She goes, this is like sand sculpting, but with pieces of wood. And Gila said, Gila's grandmother said, okay, this could be your hobby, you're saying? And Gila said, yes, I want this to be my hobby. And grandmother said, well, that's a pretty sharp knife that I'm seeing in all of those. And no offense, you'd have to take a nice knife safety course. And she goes, that's a lot of wood. We could find the wood while we go through, on our walks and stuff. But she goes, just in case we can't find a safety course, is there anything like whittling, but without a sharp knife, like that sharp, that you'd need she goes, and Gila sighed and really felt like down. And she said, holy cow. But then the librarian trainee, which probably is like librarian assistant 1, LA 1, maybe LA 2, hopefully for their sake, because then you are on a higher pay scale. Can only speak from experience. But so, they saw, and they said, hey, did you, what do you think of that book on whittling? Should we look at some other options? You want to go back? You want to check that out too with your sand sculpting book? In the RV book? And Gila said, yeah, I do. But, and then they went walking. And now the other librarian was watching too. So was grandmother was aware of it, but not watching. And the librarian, she said, well, I was thinking like, when you were so excited about that whittling, I don't know why it reminded me of this, but she goes, I grew up in central New York, home of the great New York State Fair. And that was and Gila said, tell me more. And she said, well, I don't want to get you too excited about it because she goes, it's amazing though. Like there's all sorts of things, and there's a whole dairy-based section and a milk bar where you could get chocolate milk. I think nowadays you get strawberry and plain milk, and it's just 25 cents or 50 cents or something like that. And but she goes, they have a butter sculpture. And Gila goes, really? And I don't know if this was before or after the movie. By the way, Nichols' award-winning screenplay before it was a film. The screenplay I read quite a few times became a film, Butter, about butter sculpting. But I don't know if this was probably before it was a film and a award-winning screenplay. But it was, she did say, and she said butter sculpting. And she goes, we don't have any books about butter sculpting, no. And then Gila said, well, tell me all about it. And then they looked for books about New York State Fair. They did find one in the reference section that did have pictures of the butter sculpting. And the trainee used their credit to make a couple photocopies of butter sculptures. Because I guess then they did more reference work on, they went into the microfiche or whatever. That's what it was. So anyway, then, so this is where it gets really important, right? Then Gila had, a general idea of what a butter sculpture looked like, and then checked out all those books. So she got she got freak photocopies or microfiche copies or both of, some butter sculpting and butter sculptures, but not a lot of details. A book about whittling, a book about sand sculptures, and then a book about, what was the other book? RVs, recreational vehicles. And then they started walking back, and the grandmother said, I noticed that you did 2 kayaks today, maybe even more, because you were trying to be a good listener. But she goes, so even though one is probably only 0.5 kayaks because you benefited from it, she goes, I think it was, the door was unlocked by your first kayak of trying to ask a question outside of your comfort zone and get help. So she goes, why don't you get why don't you spend $2 plus the tax and local, she goes, you could get 2 sets of sunglasses. And Gila said, I'd like to walk through the store again, though. And the grandmother said, okay. And they walked through the store, and then Gila said, I want to walk through it again. And Gila spent a lot of time in the picnic supply section and the cooking section. And finally, she said she picked out a kind of thing that you'd use to like serve cake, I think, some sort of cake cutter server, and then a box of plastic knives for a picnic. I think 50 for 99 cents. And she goes, "This is what I want." And the grandmother said, okay. And they went home, and then Gila said, like whatever, the day went on. And Gila looked through the books, all of them, paging through them, looking at it, like, because she said, well, it looks like they're using something for this butter sculpture. She said, they do have sharp knives, but she said, whatever. So then the next day, like, Gila became obsessed with trying to cut stuff. Like, first it was butter, but then that quickly, they said, okay, Gila, like, butter's not cost effective for you practicing carving on. Can we find something else? So then Gila tried making Play-Doh and modeling clay, two of the things that are like Play-Doh that she could make, but she said, this is not the same. It's not a mix of like, the things I like is like the sand sculpting. And so then Gila tried to collect dirt in the neighborhood. Obviously that didn't work. This was over the time, when the dark and stormy season was there. And she said, okay, no, that doesn't work. And then she eventually stumbled into fruits and vegetables, initially fruits, because I was like, and she said, apple's almost there, and then I can eat it afterwards if I wash my hands and my tools. But she said, it's not quite the same. It's not quite there. And then she tried other things, but again, she was trying to be conscientious of like what she could do. Because normally the maximum she could earn is like $1 a day from her grandmother. And that was the only person. And then she discovered zucchini one day. Instead of going to the 99-cent store, she said, I want to go to the bodega that has the fruit out front. And she was going kind of constantly like just buying one thing or testing it out because she just took responsibility for her own actions. She said, I'll pay for my own sculpting materials. And that's when she kind of discovered a zucchini, which was close, and it really let her, because it was on sale, like, but it couldn't be too on sale, obviously, because if it gets too soft. And that led her to cucumbers. Now, the problem with the cucumber was the inconsistency between the cucumber skin and then the interior. But those were two things she spent a lot of time working with, but not a lot of like sculpting, like some shaping. She could make shapes and stuff like that. And it wasn't until like someone came to visit, like one of her uncles, and he said, come on, like, me and my mom and you are going to go out, and like, I want to join you on your journeys and stuff. And he said, you know what you don't want to have on a rainy day? Like, what's one of the worst things you could have on a rainy day? And Gila said, ice cream, but I'll take it. And he said, okay, touche. Maybe you could get, he goes, pickles from a barrel, just three family members eating pickles in the rain, but we'll eat them under the awning so we don't get actual rain on our pickles. And so they were there eating their pickles in the rain under an awning. And as soon as the first crunch hit Gila's mouth, she said, what? She goes, and then right then a cab was driving through a puddle, and she used her body to block all the pickles, all three pickles from the, like, so that all the water from the cab hitting the puddle hit her back. And she said, was that good for $1.07? And grandmother goes, there's actually no tax on pickles. I know what you're thinking. And you could get 2 pickles for $1 right now. And so she went and bought 2 more pickles. It finished her current pickle. And this is how she discovered the first part. The pickle was to become her, whatever you call it, canvas. And she would go back to the library, and she learned to use a microfiche machine. She started learning all she could about sand sculpting and butter carving and butter sculpting, they call it, even though I guess, and actually she did learn that there was a delineation between the two in her opinion. Because she said, I guess you're sculpting marble, but she goes, it's not based on, this is using a tool to carve things away. You are creating a sculpture, so it's a process of creating a sculpture from butter. And she would always say, in my humble opinion, but the fact remains that it's not, whatever. She's like, I'm carving. Now, eventually school came, and her school happened to have shop class. And she had learned also this lesson over the dark and stormy season that she could ask for help, right? But so she asked the shop teacher, she said, is there like a class that I could take that's like on knife safety and like sharp item safety? And they said, yeah, well, we do have a class. We have the saws. Yeah, we like, we use some like whatever those called, the super sharp knives. We could like, I could come up with some sort of after school seminar and get some other kids involved. Because I've been starting to think about starting a whittling club. Would you want to take part? And Gila said, I would take part in the training. And I would also support your whittling or teaching of whittling. And I would probably take the class, but I would be using a pickle. And the teacher thought she was joking, but that she was, like a sort of a dry humor. And the teacher said, amazing, like, we'll get it done. So then they had a sharp edged item, safety class, and other kids signed up for it. And then they started a whittling club. And on the first day of whittling club, Gila showed up with pickles, and they sat down, and and the teacher said, Gila, that's enough. I think you're taking your joke far enough. We're going to start carving, and we're going to go through our first whittling lesson. And Gila said, I'll be whittling pickles. And the teacher said, really? And Gila said, yeah, really. I'm going to not use the sharpest items currently. Like, I'm going to use, she had kind of developed her own tools out of plastic, bought from 99-cent store, or picnic flatware, paring stuff, anything, 99-cent store based equipment. But she said, I'm also going to try to, learn some of the finer things. And the teacher said, okay, sounds fair. It's a club. So, and I guess you're whittling a pickle. And Gila agreed because she knew that this teacher was an authority figure and volunteering their time, and she would get paid $1 from her grandmother later for it. But she, in her head, said, I'm carving pickles, but sculpting pickles, no, I'm carving pickles. She goes, I guess you're there's wood carvers and there's whittlers. She said, you could say I'm a pickle whittler. You could call me the pickle whittler, but this just sounds weird. But she knew in her heart she was a pickle carver, and never thought, honestly, until this point of the podcast that I'm telling the tale. This is why it's an untold tale. I said, oh, boy, it's not meant to have any level of innuendo to it. But something about saying a pickle whittler, I don't know. But it's not. It's this whole story is I guess somehow I got in a story bog there. But so anyway, so Gila followed the kind of class progression, and this teacher was still kind of learning whittling too. So it was a lot of sticks with beards, and the closest thing they got was in the fall was a Santa Claus on a stick. And it was a little bit different for Gila because it was learning to do that on a pickle, but also at the time, a pickle was the kind of thing. And then Gila learned the power of this was the next progression was actually, this is another story within Gila's life, but there was a time, I think this was the Santa Claus one. She said, well, we don't celebrate Christmas. And I And then someone that she had a crush on said something to her. So she left her pickle, like at her workstation, just went home because it was summer or winter break anyway. And, it was her first case of, like, brokenheartedness, which when she got back, when no one knew, because the teacher was like, I can't wait to get out here either. This is my free time, that her pickle was still on her workstation, and she was usually the first one there because, I don't know, she liked to, she learned a lot about, but so the pickle had dried out, another bit, and it changed shape yet again. And so this became like an obsession of hers, because she would put the pickles back in the jar, or she just never thought about like leaving it out, a sculpture out to dry, because she lived in an apartment, right? There wasn't a lot of places to leave pickles out to dry. So she would either say this sculpture is edible or not and just move on. And this was in the early days of composting. So she was like bringing it to a compost center just so anybody's like, she's wasting pickles. No. And I think there was even, I don't know if pigs eat pickles, but I think maybe there was something like where she was giving the pickles to somebody who could eat pickles and not have to worry about the fact they were handled by someone. I think it was like a neighborhood pig or something, but that might have been in my imagination. But so anyway, this is the kind of thing, it wasn't like it followed, like this became her hobby. And she got better and better at it. And for a while, people would be like, no one else got it, because it was different. Here's the thing, especially if you learn on wood, switching over to pickle, it's just not doable for most people. So even the kids in her class, they would try to carve pickles, but it was just, they were too, they didn't have the touch, the pickle touch. But Gila did. And so, and no one, at that point, these are kids hanging out after school whittling. It's not like, they became their own, they became friends. And, this wasn't like Gila's only thing. But again, this was just this ongoing thing that this community dealt with at this time period, the dark and stormy season. And Gila still had a lot of dark and stormy seasons left. But, the drying of the pickle created this new thing. Now, it wasn't Gila's only form of expression. And in fact, it led to something new. But what happened was, all the kids would talk about how they gifted, after the holidays, she had her dried pickle. All the other kids talked about gifting their Santa Claus piece of wood to a family member. And who painted it or who did that. And Gila was just staring at her Santa Claus. And then one kid said, not only did they paint it, but they stuck it in a pot and put branches on it, and they sold it. Now it was at a some part of their belief system's community thing, community sale or white elephant sale or something. But she said, wait a second, you sold that a stick that had a beard and a hat carved in it and a face? And I said, well, I painted it. And then I put the stick like it was a tree. And then I put pine branches on it that I found on the ground. Totally found them on the ground. Didn't tear them off any city park trees. I put some pine cones around it. Painted the pine cones green. And, I called it the Santa tree. And she said, interesting. And her heart did, beat to it. She said, this person's got it together. But she also was like, wait a second. I wonder if you could make money at this. Because also, even though this wasn't her hobby, she had a fire for her dream was to have an RV and travel by RV. And also to go to the Great New York State Fair. And so she started a hobby. At first, not totally, she had to do a lot of testing on how to properly dry a pickle, which I have no idea about, so don't ask me about it. I mean, I think eventually she stumbled, when it wasn't the dark and stormy season, on a solar oven, because I think that was another thing they did as part of one of the shop classes she started taking, which is like just some sort of metal thing you leave out in the sun, heats it up. And she could do that on her balcony. And she, would test out drying the pickles and stuff. And then she told, very supportive family, very supportive community with the library members. She started to find like the neighborhood art sale, which was quarterly. And she started selling her pickle art there. And then people said, what about, the pickles, not dried? And she said, well, they have to be in a jar with liquid. And they said, okay. So then she started making, this became very popular. Her best-selling item for a time, though it go in and out, was she figured out a way with different liquids, not just pickle juice, but at first she sold stuff with pickle juice, but people were like, But then she started figuring out different density of liquids and putting lead weights inside the pickle, and she would sell these pickle fish that would be able to float in the liquid because of whatever the liquid and the weights, I don't know, dispersion or whatever the heck you call it. And she would call them aquariums or something, pickle aquarium, I think they were called. And I mean, this is the city. So then she started being able to sell these to shops, distinct shops that sold hip stuff. And she became known around this part of town, like a village type part of town, as a pickle artist, though she said, I'm the pickle carver. And she would always they'd say, oh, this is Gila, as she started to get older and older or grow up. And so she started making money. She was always saving this money. And then everybody said, well, are you going to go to art school? And she said, no, I'm going to get an RV. I'm going to go to the Great New York State Fair. And they said, but what about art school? And she said, I think maybe one day, but right now I want to meet some butter sculpt. I want to figure out increasing my skill. And she was able to go to the New York State Fair before she had an RV. She saved up the money so that they could take the train to Syracuse and stay there. And, everybody decided, okay, well, why don't you just pay 10% of the trip and we'll pay 90%. And then she said, well, next year I want to set up my own thing and sell my pickle art at the Great New York State Fair. Because she met the butter sculpture winners. And she started to get, correspond with members of the butter sculpting community and kind of learn. And there was even, this was before, so she got zines, and I think there was, a list serve, rec.buttersculpture or something. But then the first year she did she managed to purchase an RV. And then this was another slight downturn, was that her first year at the Great New York State Fair, she rented an outdoor booth. It was a particular dark and stormy season, and people just walked by because they didn't understand. I don't know. It was just a different crowd. It was busy. And then she noticed towards the end of the Great New York State Fair, that she didn't have any motion or any music or anything, because she started to notice the places she tended towards. There were either a lot of people in line, or there was something flashy and moving, or the person was doing something. And she said, oh, interesting. And she also, that year, the butter sculpture was a history of the great musicians from the central New York area. And there was one person who played the clarinet, and she said, holy cow, I don't know, at some point, not at the New York State Fair, she said, as she was planning for the next one, she said, I got to come up with something. So she started to wonder, could I make instruments I could play or someone else could play at the Great New York State Fair? And she said, well, I should focus on my pickle carving. And so then she tried to figure out, and again, she lived in the big city still, so she could go to places and meet people that played woodwind instruments, meet instrument makers, and she started to slowly make her own playable instruments the piccolo being the most famous one that she would grow great acclaim for. Because then what she would do is invite musicians that were probably already at the Great New York State Fair initially, because then she would tour fairs everywhere. You still may find her, Gila, the Pickle Carver, and they would play pickle-based instruments at her booth, and then obviously it would create a crowd. It got to the point where she was, being able to pay the musicians. She said, she would always joke, I can pay you in pickles. She didn't even realize that till right when she started just touring that she could sell her own pickles. She was like, wait a second, and she met someone and they became, and then they had a romantic and a working relationship, living in the RV, touring around is not for everybody, but for the right person. So they would sell the pickles and pickle related treats, and, the pickle art, and Gila would make the art or explain the art during the New York State Fair and stuff. But, they would do the thing where Gila would, for at least a few hours a day, would be if there wasn't music, there'd be sculpting. And they created, sculptures, non-pickle sculptures to kind of make motion, like a pickle dryer, which was foot pumped, but it had a big wheel on the outside of the booth that's flashy and, a bellows going up and down. So it just created more motion. But yeah, that's the tale of the Pickle Carver. Maybe a tale you've never heard before, but now you have, and you might be the sleepier for it. Good night, everybody. All right, I want to thank everybody that became a patron recently. I want to thank Sabisola, Rachel, and Cody. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Jenna, Kaylee, and John. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Will, Jacob, and Teresa. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Kate, Lucas, and Alexis. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Amy, Alexander, and Samantha. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank DXB, Samantha D, that one, and Christina. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Sue, Alex, and Sierra. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. I want to thank Aaron, Adge, and KLJ. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. And then I want to thank Sarah, Ari, Marissa, and Tim. Thank you. Thanks, and good night. Thanks for everybody who supports the show. That's how we're able to come out free twice a week as people that support the show directly or support our sponsors. And, there's free ways to help the show. Best free ways, just spread the word about podcasting in general. If Sleep With Me comes up or sleep, that's fine. But the easiest way is to introduce people to a podcast app, or just talk in a general way about podcasting, and in a not, for some reason, I don't totally get. A lot of people, you could even say these audio shows I listen to on my phone and let them say podcast, and you say, oh yeah, use this app, tell them which app you use. Oh yeah, you get that in the store, totally free. Podcasts are free. And these are the podcasts within my interests that I listen to, or one or two of them. I don't know, you kind of got to plant the seed and then later sleep with me. So it's a free way to support the show and support everybody else who listens to podcasts, makes podcasts, and relies on podcasting to pay their bills and stuff. Growing podcasts benefits everybody. And there's more podcasts to listen to. So, do that. And here's either Tuck You In sponsor or me. That's how we grew all the extra free archives. Thanks.